I want to get better at drawing. I've been drawing every day for over a year now, but it felt like I want to make more meaningful progress. I can see my skills have improved from drawing every single day, but there's still a long way to go from where I want them to be. And so I realized that I needed to earnestly study someone's art in order to improve and apply it to my own work. I tried this a bit early on with Sweet Ishida, but realized very quickly that I was out of my depth because he's kind of the GOAT and is doing so many techniques and things that I just did not have the ability to comprehend at the time. I plan to return to studying him, but for a first step, I lacked the skills and abilities needed to copy him because he's just turning out masterpieces like this, and I'm like, where do I begin? So while aimlessly wandering across YouTube, I stumbled upon TPPO's video on Qtonagi and was immediately hooked by her art style. There's something about her pieces that ensnared me and made me want to study her more. Her pieces all felt like scenes, and there was so much detail packed into everything while still feeling like a cohesive thing. And as I started to study her, I began to see the true depths of a master who has been drawing for well over a decade. But before we get into actually drawing, allow me to regale you the simpler reasons I wanted to study Kitanagi's art. First, she draws with the 6-head proportion, which I just like more. My brain likes the 1, 2, 3 breakdown better, but as a fledgling artist, I assumed it would be easier. Oh, how naive I was. That is not the case. It is just the same amount of work. Just because it has less heads doesn't mean it is any less effort to do. But God forbid a man try to sneak his way around learning art fundamentals. Who hasn't? I know at least one time in your life you've done it. God forbid a man try to not learn things. And of course be humbled and then realize, oh yeah, you do have to learn those things. The other reason I wanted to study Kitanagi was because almost all of her drawings are full body illustrations with interesting poses and actual backgrounds. As much as I love drawing bust up illustrations to hide my lack of skill at drawing other things and just kind of cutting it off where it looks bad, I don't want it to become a crutch. I want to draw the whole body so I get practice drawing the whole body. I want to force myself to engage with every little piece of it and not just cut it off where I hate it, because that is not helping me grow. Now with that out of the way, where to begin my studying? Well, for starters, since I want to understand the proportions, I broke down several drawings and gauged how many heads tall the characters were. And what I found was that her characters are generally 6.5 heads tall, with 1 for the head, 2 for the body, 3 for the legs, and about half for the foot. This was all just guesswork, but I did get semi-confirmation on a time-lapse where I saw what looked to be the heads marking out the proportions. So I went frame by frame to screenshot that to have it as proof. But then I, like an idiot, forgot that it was just on a live stream and I could have just scrolled to that timestamp that had it much easier than a split-second image. Because, you know, why take the easy route when you could just think for 2 seconds? But I did find it interesting that she uses the whole head, more like a spherical head-shaped thing for the proportions. Because I was just doing it with lines and kind of called it good, which works, but I think using the heads is better for gauging the overall size, because especially if it's a female character, usually it's a head is as wide as the person is, so that helps. The lines aren't inherently bad, and you can kind of get around it where you do like squares and things, but a head is a bit better than a line, but they have their uses. Speaking of lines, I studied the limb width by taking the head length and just drawing that as a line and then guesstimating the limb widths onto it, which my results proved that the neck was about 1/6 of the head, the legs were about 1/3, and the arm was about 1/4. But these are not real numbers. They are, well, this kind of looks like 1/3 of the head kind of numbers. They're kind of just vibed out fractions. Once I had the broad proportions written down, I moved on to the face shape, since I really loved how she drew faces. They're so cute, but felt approachable enough for me to try and draw them on my own. I noticed the bottom of the eye generally meets at the halfway point of the ear, or what I call the pivot point, because I don't know if it has a real name, or if I just hallucinated the change and was like, this is a place I can put a landmark. The top of the eye varied because sometimes at the top of the ear and others it was at the halfway point of the ear. The most normal of these is the bottom of the ear connecting to the chin in the inverted triangle-esque shape, with the angle kind of depending on the pose and where the character is looking. The eyes themselves are fairly simple and pastel-esque, but cute and have an alluring property to them. The mouths are fairly simple and the hair is just a whole beast of its own, but every part of Qtonagi's pieces flows into something I noticed early on, which is that Qtonagi rarely has a straight up and down character. Some part of the pose is always angled or curved, and usually most parts of it are. I didn't learn this from observation initially, but I tried to redraw this Metal Gear Solid character pose into her style and went, wow, this looks like shit. And then had a brain blast and went, wait a second, it's because it's not dynamic at all. It's basically just straight up and down, which is not a thing in a Qtonagi piece. And that unearthed the piece of her style that I loved, but couldn't put my finger on because I lacked the eye to notice it. Her anatomy may be simpler, but you'd never notice it with the flowy dresses, impeccable fashion choices, and interesting poses that help make it interesting to look at. And that's before we get to the backgrounds, which are a world of their own that tell so much about the character while also looking absolutely stunning and detailed. The simplest part of her pieces is probably the generally harsh lighting, but even that feels like it blends into the piece nicely. It feels cohesive and like every aspect was designed with a goal in mind. As I said earlier, she is setting the scene and focusing every individual part of the piece on conveying what she wants. She's a confident artist, but that makes sense given that she's been drawing for well over a decade. However, I didn't initially understand this fact. I arrived at it by putting egg on my face, because initially I only studied her time lapses, for some reason ignoring the numerous art live streams she does. And with this gave me another false impression, which was that she was just kind of freely flowing her lines and just going with it. I just assumed she felt the lines in her soul and fixed it later. But then I actually watched the live stream and I went, I'm an idiot. The live streams gave the impression that she's very intentional about her lines, judging by the amount of undo key clicks I heard. But now that I had realized there was a whole world to study in the live streams, I focused on them for a while. Thanks to her English notes on some streams, I learned she uses Photoshop, which probably would have been obvious if I knew what programs looked like, but I don't. She uses the Derek Zabrocki brush set, which I downloaded because it was free, might as well. And maybe a 9000 by 9000 canvas, I'm not 100% sure on that. There's a note about it, but I don't know for sure if that's what it was referring to. But it's on there, and I'm inclined to believe it. The brush set I use now as one of my alternate sets of it. I don't know what specific brushes she uses besides the one she used for shadows, which I think is the sketchy brush. I probably could just fiddle around with the little impression things I get on Clip Studio Paint where it has the shape of the brush, but that's a lot of work for a brush set that has like 100 brushes in it. For my own attempts, I just fiddled around with brushes until settling on a few and calling it good enough. Are they the correct ones? Probably not, but they seemed fine. But beyond all these specific notes and trial and errors, I learned two very large details. First is, unless the recording software doesn't like zooming in, which I don't see why it wouldn't. Either way, Qtonagi very rarely zooms in during the early parts of the piece. She will later on, but even then it's nothing crazy. You're not seeing the pixels on really any capacity. It's maybe like 25% zoomed in if I had to guess at any given detailed moment. And second, she draws with very minimal layers. Most of the time she will really only have layers for distinct sections or if she needs to add something temporarily to merge it down later. But on the whole, everything ends up being done mostly on one layer. Initially, I thought she just raw ripped shading, but after remembering that Google Translate can translate screenshots, I discovered that she at least uses multiply and overlay layers for shadows and light respectively, but even those get merged down to the main layer at some point. I say all of this with hindsight because I need to actually start showing you my art attempt. My first attempt was done in Procreate because I don't have Photoshop and Procreate is my primary drawing place at the moment. I decided to draw an Orissa Ravencroft of Hololive English Advent in an outfit I found on this image on Twitter, and with a screenshot from Ocean's 11 as the background because I want to make a heist manga and was gathering references. My primary study material for this attempt was Qtonagi's live streams, especially her live stream for the Ace of Hearts card, which will turn out to bite me in the butt later, but first, let's critique. I caved about halfway, 2/3 on the whole not zooming in much, but I did try to be intentional about zooming in less than I usually do, because a lot of the times I'll zoom in really detailed and I just need to not do that, because it's getting into the pixels and I'm like, no one can see this. As for the piece itself, I think the body proportions are off, but also because I adjusted the arms up and forgot to bring the rest of the whole body with it. I also think the eyes are too big, which is just an error on my part, but they are fine enough. It's a smaller mistake than the rest of it. But all of this brings me to my first key takeaway, which is that Qtonagi's pieces always keep the whole piece in mind. The lack of zooming in and overall cohesion of the piece all need to be kept in consideration to make her pieces as good as they are. For me, some of this will come with time and experience, since there is over a decade of difference in experience. But I also think I tend to lose sight of the piece as a whole once I start working on details, because you just zoom in and then you just forget to zoom out, and all of a sudden you look up and you're like, wow, that is not correct. Drawing in one layer helps that focus since you're navigating everything at once instead of just splicing it over like 40 different layers. And it kind of works with Procreate because my iPad is not the newest one, so I only have at any given point not a ton of layers because I'm usually doing about 3000 by 4000, which is only about 40. But even beyond that, just in general, I need to pause and stop to look at the whole rough line art of piece and just the piece in general before committing to coloring, because I think once I start coloring and then I mess something up, I go, man, it's too late, I'm just gonna keep going, which is not helpful because it is just not helping me fix mistakes. It is just going, I'll fix it later. Had I started earlier and really honed the piece to a level I was comfortable with before going on to coloring and all that, I would have caught so many mistakes much earlier than when I had colored the entire piece and stepped back and went, oh, I forgot to bring a half of her body up to meet the rest of it. But there are things I think I did okay on with the piece. I think I did surprisingly well with Nerissa's horns, which I usually struggle with while drawing and half the time forget are even there. I think the overall pose isn't terrible. I think it just maybe needs to be a bit more dynamic. The baggy pants definitely hinder it a bit, but the thought was there. I do like how I did the eyes, even they are a bit big, as I said before. They're not the worst part of the thing. They're definitely not as accurate to Qtonagi's pieces, but they are an attempt. And I applaud myself for creating at least a like 3% difficult background instead of kind of just scribbling shapes on a piece of paper until it works. Even if I kind of failed at making the background detailed in any capacity. But as you'll notice the piece as a whole, there's a significant lack of rendering. So you know how I was studying the live stream, as I've brought up multiple times. Well, let's guess how much of the speed paint is from the live stream. And while you're taking a second to ponder your answer, consider hitting the subscribe button for more videos on my art journey, because I like making art a lot, and as videos have slowed down is because I am just making more art. Now, do you have your answer? Have you thought long and hard about this? If you guessed 10 seconds, you'd be correct. A 3-hour live stream is 10 seconds of a basically minute-and-a-half speed paint. So we're going to go back to studying the speed paint. While refocusing on the speed paints, I noticed that Qtonagi loses a lot more layers here, even if they are temporary. There's experimentation and blend modes, which really helped humanize Qtonagi as an artist for me. It's really easy to see these great artists as idols, but ultimately every piece is made by a human being who poured their time and energy into it, and Qtonagi is no exception. Which for me is a boost to my confidence, because if a human can do it, I can do it as well. I am a human. With time and practice, I can too stand along with the greats. And to add this to my mandatory haiku mention, because it's not a video if I don't bring up haiku, because it is the greatest piece of fiction of all time, it brings me back to the Akita Shinsuke mindset of the results being a product of the process, and the daily efforts that we make to improve that will eventually bear fruit. But this time we got an extra addition, which is from the famous Oikawa scene of talent versus hard work, and talent being something to make bloom. I can be a great artist alongside Qtonagi by continuing to grit my teeth and improve. I haven't done everything I can. Even as I said earlier, I kind of just gave up on fixing a mistake because I went, oh, it's too far. I could not do that next time. I could still improve. I can keep going higher and getting better. And by coming back to draw every day, I will get better, and by engaging with my art in terms of how I will grow, I can also continue to get better. And as a study reference, Qtonagi is one of the better ones because there is ample footage to study from to use to get better. We've got the live streams, the speed paints, etc., etc. To use as a point of comparison, I want to study more manga artists because I want to make manga, which we'll get to later because I did make a manga, but I want to do it more. So many of them, you are lucky if you get a live drawing. Maybe you get a jump review for a couple Shonen Jump ones, but for most of them, you get a 2-minute time lapse of them drawing the main character in a neutral background, and that's about it. Whereas Qtonagi, I have live streams, speed paints, English translations on some of her streams, and so much more. There's just a difference there that I have all these resources I can use to get better. And so this time I actually used them and took out my pen again to make a second attempt at this. I was originally going to do my second attempt with Zaihi from Arknight's Enfield, but I watched the Umusume movie and fell in love with Dansu Flame, who is also a surprisingly good fit for the theme of this video. Because a lot of her lines are about how she doesn't see herself as anyone special, but time and time again, she steps up to race and she loves it. And in doing so, she gets better as a racer and as a person. I saw so much of myself in her, so naturally I immediately pivoted my drawing to one of her. Granted, I had not really done anything with Zaihi there. I saw how detailed her design was and went, oh. And then I saw Dansu Flame and went, this is much simpler. I can do this. And man, this second piece is so much better. Is it a good Qtonagi piece? Not particularly. The background is very simple and the overall mood is much more gloomier than Qtonagi's pieces, but as an overall improvement on my art, it is so much better. The outfit is from a clothes brand picture I found on Twitter, and the background is meant to be a classroom in Tracen Academy. The overall time on this piece is also exponentially longer than the Nerissa one, but not for the reason you think. Spoilers for the feature video and the manga that I talked about, which you should subscribe for because it was a very interesting process and I have a lot to talk about. I decided to enter a manga contest, and as such, basically a month went by where I worked on this piece for a collective 2 hours maybe, which was usually just coloring in the flats. But once I submitted my entry and got it done, I locked in to finish it, get all the finishing touches in. And my first thought after finishing this piece was a silly realization that came about because I was working on one layer. Because you ever just look at a line art in a piece and go, damn, this line art is too thick. And there's the funny thing, guys, you can just change that. Who would have guessed? The line art isn't untouchable as much as it seems like it is sometimes, but I think having the flat colors and line art on one layer helped me internalize that a bit more because I can just color over it and add more if I need to be, or get rid of some of it. Which really did help me understand the appeal of working on one layer, which is a thing I never thought I would say. There is still merit to constructing the piece as parts and kind of having layers separated for things, But once I'm rendering, I can see a good reason to just merge everything and paint over it to refine details, because that way it removes the line art as this god and makes it malleable and changeable as it should be, because it's on the same level as everything else. Because without it, I'm constantly having to remind myself that yes, I can kill the line art with my own 2 hands and reform it in the shape I want it to be. But before I start critiquing the piece, I want to shout out the UmaRef's website for giving me good references for this, because man, it's so nice when you have a good reference for a character. But now it's time to critique. I think the piece could be more dynamic to fit in Qtonagi style, even if I do like it a lot as it is. It is more flowy than the last one, it's more out there, but it is still not quite what my mind's eye thinks as flowy and dynamic as Qtonagi's. As I said earlier, the background is very plain, but honestly, I just didn't know what to add. Backgrounds are still something I struggle with because I don't really know what to put there, especially with Qtonagi style where there's so much there and it's so detailed and says so much about the character. And admittedly, I do not know as much about Dansu Flame as I probably could. I just know her from the movie. I didn't really do any digging into the niche things yet. I just put Dansu Flame on a whiteboard and went, this looks kind of cool, I'm gonna keep it. Kind of just fell into the habit of not creating a scene instead of just putting a character and putting it in the background, which is something I need to be more conscious of, even if I was trying to, but it's hard. To take all of this back several layers again, I have only been drawing for a little over a year, maybe close to a year and a half. I don't really know at this point. I'm still new. I'm still daunted by the amount of things I need to do. And lastly, now that I'm kind of staring at the piece from afar, God, I really got to stop getting neurotic about the little details. I'm really like, man, I got to do all this for this tiny little area, make sure it's shaded just right, make sure everything's a little covered up, and you just can't see it. Like, I know every art tutorial is like, you gotta look at the big picture, the small stuff doesn't matter, but you like get neurotic and you're like, I gotta fix this little thing, and you look and it's like, I can't even see it, what are we doing here? But I think as an overall piece, it looks pretty good. I'm happy-ish with how it turned out. It could obviously be better, but it does feel like one of those art pieces where I look at it and I'm like, damn, I did that. That's pretty good. And now that I've finished these pieces, allow me to muse philosophically throughout art for a bit. I think this study definitely helped me grow, but I also think it will be a good stepping stone in the grand scheme of things. Because it is my first one, I have taken the things from the first one and I can apply those to future things. But also I think people say that an art style is this or that, but I've kind of come to internalize it as this culmination of choices you make in a piece. It's not like, oh, you do the lines this way necessarily. It's the choices you are making that are the product of your influences and of the things you do. Again, it's the Kitanagi game method of the results being paved by the process. Every little choice you make and create a piece of art leads to your style, whether that be distinct or not. It is a piece made by uniquely you, screw ups and all. But by the time I finished this piece, I was ready to move on and study another artist. I don't think I'm fully done with Qtonagi, but I did enjoy that it helped me find the aspects of her art that I liked and will take with me into the future. Even if it's just a piece, something is something. 1 + 1 is 2. This will undoubtedly be the first of many studies I do, but with each of them, it's a training step. I can train my eye and my hand to become a better artist. Even just drawing after it, I can see that I am a little bit better at drawing poses. Not a lot, but a little bit. But now that I've tried my hand at making a manga, I want to focus all of that on studying manga artists, because drawing a manga is hard, but it feels so damn good when you finish that guy. So look forward to that video whenever it comes out, and then eventually my return to studying Sweet Ishida, because every artist has their Sweet Ishida phase, and I own the art book, and every time I look at the Urie volume cover from Tokyo Ghoul Re, I want to draw like him more and more. But for now, we've reached the end of phase 1. That's not even a phase, what am I talking about? But if you enjoyed this and want to see more, like and subscribe, comment below what you thought of the piece. If you like it, any nice critique is welcome. We don't need to be saying this looks like shit. I know you can be nice and help me improve, and I will see you with whatever art thing I make next, which is gonna be the one with the manga contest probably, unless I think of something better or am possessed by the devil of Vocaloid music.